So, I wanted to sort of explain why Britain is broke, and I wanted to start with a bit of a technical story and explain what it actually means. The Labour government, Rachel Reeves, in her eternal genius, has decided that she wanted to do something with pensions. And what she wants to do is to force everybody who is on a direct contribution pension fund, it means that you're actually paying into your pension, to actually have that money in mega funds that are at least 25 billion. But then she also wants to force these pension funds to invest at least a portion of their assets in projects that suit her, be it equities in Britain or be it financing infrastructure, or perhaps one day buying government debt. Now, why does this matter? Because the only responsibility of a fund manager, typically in Britain, of somebody who you give money to manage these assets for you, their only responsibility is to you as a shareholder or to you as a customer whose money is being managed. That's the extent of it. They don't have any sort of, you have to do this in the national interest, you have to do this for the sake of the state. The Chinese do it, and they do it with some success, but they do it actually for the benefit of Chinese citizens, whereas there is a bit of a complicating factor here in that these guys think that they want to save the world. Go on.
Can I have a question? So basically what you're saying is she's taking our money.
She's taking the money that
she's
saving
using
for
it
your retirement.
Exactly. And she's using it to funds that you don't think are going to give money back.
She's using it, so they haven't specifically said what they're going to use it for.
Which is not good.
Which is not good. But they've said that they will gain the right to decide what to use a portion of it. Okay. And the portion they're talking about right now is 10%. You think 10% is a little, but it's actually a lot, because these funds rely on annual returns. You have to keep growing the fund by a couple of percentage points every year so that by the time you retire, there is enough money saved for you to be able to retire on it. That's the logic behind it. So taking any amount of that money is actually a problem. And there's a market issue here, which is that, if you have a preferred provider that you save that money with, you might prefer to work with a smaller provider. For all kinds of reasons, people might prefer a smaller company that they think that they can trust. She wants to make sure that all of the funds are at least 25 billion. Why? Because making the funds bigger into bigger pools of capital means that there are fewer managers and fewer people to deal with. So in a way, it's easier to impose things on them, and it's easier to impose an omerta on them to keep them absolutely silent in case her decisions don't really work out. So there's a political logic to this here, where the state is trying to more fully consolidate over the money that's available. Now, why do they think that this is necessary? Well, the reason that they think is necessary is that they can't stop borrowing money. They keep on spending. They forecast that they're going to spend a certain amount, and they usually miss it by £1 billion or a couple of billion pounds. And it's happening at a rate that is slowly becoming out of control and astronomical. Their government borrowing, they hit the third highest record in the last fiscal year. The only two times they exceeded that record was during COVID, when Rishi Sunak just started printing money left and right like a lunatic.
Furlough and all the rest of it.
All of the other insane stuff that came from the COVID lockdowns. And the previous one was during the 2009-2010 fiscal year, where they were dealing with the aftermath of the 2008 fiscal crisis, which we haven't recovered from since. So they keep on borrowing more and more money, and they're doing this at a record level now without any kind of crisis. Like, there's no sort of overarching reason for this. They just have an agenda, they want to implement it, and they don't care about the consequences. Now,
it's incidental when it comes. It's frequent when it comes with big government, because they want the people to pay, to use their money in ways that support their agenda.
yes.
They want to limit, in a sense, economic freedom, and
So-
say, I know how I'm going to use your money better than you.
Exactly. Last week, we were talking about the way that the Equalities Act is being applied,
Yeah.
and how this is forcing everybody to get onto the same wage level. And this is trying to sort of socially engineer Britain to make sure that everybody is getting paid the same, no matter qualifications, no matter language spoken, no matter capability, etc. To force this kind of thing is very expensive because it's insane and extremely unnatural, and this is not how society actually works.
Sure.
A healthy society relies on a level of freedom and on a level of individual decision making. This has always been the Western tradition. These guys think that the Western tradition is wrong because it's based on white supremacy. And so to implement their ideals, they need to spend absolutely abhorrent amounts of money. And this has led Britain to having a debt to GDP over 100%. Now, what's debt to GDP? How much you borrow in absolute terms, like the dollar amount or the pound amount, is not that important. What matters is how much you borrow relative to your income. So if you're paying 50% of your income on debt, you're clearly managing your life extremely badly. If your borrowing is 5 times what you've earned, you're clearly managing your life very badly. The standard EU fiscally responsible level for debt to GDP is 60%. Now, all of the EU is missing that.
Yeah.
Britain's is at 105, 106%. The World Bank data, I haven't looked at the methodology, says 160%. So it's quite catastrophic.
Yeah, the number sounds familiar from Greece.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we saw what happened to Greece. The unofficial number, when you include all of the pensions, is closer to 400% of GDP. When you include the money that is owed for pensions and for unfunded liabilities, is the technical term that they use, for basically things that you've promised to pay in the future, but you haven't issued debt to pay them yet, is 400%. And this is also comparable to Europe. This is not a Britain-only story, but we're just using Britain as an example here.
Well, the goal is to crush everyone with debt and say, number one, because we care about the debt to GDP ratio, we want to implement policies that make GDP go up.
Yep,
And there is no course correction when data shows that GDP sometimes doesn't go up.
exactly. Yeah. So basically, they've borrowed an absolutely insane amount of money. And with all of that, the amount of spending relative to the size of the economy is at a peak. So they're basically maxing out their spending relative to the size of the economy. They've never spent that much. They keep on borrowing more. And part of the problem that they have is that the debt is growing faster than the GDP is growing. And the debt is bigger than the size of the budget deficit. Let me see if I can find the deficit here somewhere. Anyway, the deficit is around 5 or 6% of GDP. The growth is around 1% of GDP. Which means that this 1% of GDP wouldn't even exist if they weren't borrowing money and pumping it into the economy. So they're borrowing to fund growth, and the growth is below the amount that they're borrowing.
This is crushing the economy because apart from that, there is also the element of increasing taxes. So if you crush the private sector, if you make everyone who wants to engage in entrepreneurship want to leave, some of them will actually leave.
And sorry, no, carry on.
Yeah, and crush everyone with debt, the economy is going to be destroyed.
Well, we're going to mention both of these points. Firstly, this is the sort of amount that they're spending and the amount that they're taxing. and they expect it to keep going up indefinitely, and they expect to take more and more money out of the economy. And secondly, and just as importantly, they're failing to achieve any kind of growth. So this is called the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index. This tells you how much companies are spending and the extent to which they expect the economy to grow. So it's not a measure of GDP, but it correlates very closely with whether or not there's economic growth. 50 means that it's neutral. Above 50 means that it's growing. Under 50 means that it's falling. And you can see that especially the manufacturing output is falling apart. So Keir Starmer was attacking Nigel Farage yesterday because Nigel Farage doesn't support British industry and he's a bad guy and Farage. Well, Keir Starmer's policies obviously are not supporting industry in any way. And part of the reason that they're not supporting industry is because not just they're pursuing this insane woke agenda of trying to create the utopia of total racial equality, but it's largely to do with net zero and the fact that Britain is paying 50% more for energy costs than Germany and France.
Yes, this is something that I previously covered on here about the fact that, in particular to the, steel industry, the single steelworks in Scunthorpe, but the energy that is required to make steel is owned by Électricité de France. It's owned by a fully nationalised French energy company.
Yep.
So the energy prices are entirely dictated by the French state, who are obviously lovers and have our best interests at heart.
Always have, always will.
Yes.
But there's another interesting thing about this article. I can sort of understand it for France because France has a let's say very powerful domestic energy network.
Nuclear.
But yes, exactly. And but it's interesting for Germany because this is a 2024 article, as I saw, and that means basically at least 2 years after the war in Ukraine started.
Yes.
I think that's all September, which means 2.5 years. And Germany based almost all of its energy on cheap Russian gas.
Yep.
So the very fact that in Britain people are paying about 50 PC more than in Germany is really frightening.
You can thank Theresa May for imposing the net zero mandates, and you can thank Ed Miliband for being even crazier. Britain pays 4 times more for electricity than the United States. The United States is doing everything that it can to deregulate and to pump more energy to make its energy even cheaper and to make it expensive to produce outside the United States. Britain wants to sign a free trade deal with the United States with these energy prices. So there's no way that they can make this work. And on top of the energy prices, there is the extreme, insane regulation that we spoke about last week that is also paralyzing manufacturing, paralyzing industry, paralyzing pretty much everything. So they're borrowing more and more, they're achieving less and less, and in order to solve their problem, they're seizing the assets that you're supposed to be saving for your retirement and trying to push them into their ideological projects. So you could easily see them deciding to force your pension providers to put their money into Ed Miliband's harebrained energy schemes. Yeah. Or
in the NHS, which continuously just is...
Or into buying government debt to fund the NHS.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a void of an institution that money just disappears into with no improvement whatsoever.
Yep. And they have zero coherence in their plans. So they were saying that they were going to cut spending and that they were going to sort of have to be financially responsible. And so they removed this benefit and that benefit and the winter fuel, and they want to make it harder for people to claim benefits and so on. And they're U-turning on all of this, while at the same time giving pay rises above inflation to the civil service. Politically, this is wise, because their voting constituencies include the civil service. The civil service is a collection of extremely liberal, extremely progressive left-wingers who all join in the worst kind of groupthink. And then they have their aging lefties and their benefit claimants and so on that they have to keep paying money to in exchange for their votes. So they can't actually do the sensible things that are required for them to survive, for the economy to survive, and also survive politically. The sound economics are very bad politics, especially for the Labour Party, especially for the party of welfare and the party of endless dependence on the state. And then you look at what they are spending the money on. There's other, which is the biggest one. 18.3% of government spending is going to healthcare, to the NHS.
Only.
I actually
You'd
thought
expect
it'd
it to
be
be
more than
more.
that.
I expected it to be more. Fair enough.
Good
And
news,
then
everyone.
there's social
Because
security.
we don't
and
think
pensions.
like leftists.
Yes.
That's why.
Yeah. And then there are benefits. So the benefit costs for people of working age are 10% of their total spending. Education, fair enough, good for you, 9%. But maybe less funding for people studying random disciplines that can't actually do anything productive. I won't name names. Almost 10% on paying interest rates, paying off the interest on the debt. So that's quickly becoming a huge expense. And the more they borrow, the bigger this proportion becomes. They're okay for now, but it's getting really bad. Defense, 2.2% of GDP, something like that, so 4.8% of spending. And necessary things like transport are 3%. Public order, another 4%. So it's mainly being spent on just current spending. This is the graph that is most terrifying, though. The total amount of spending that is going to investment, which is what's going to generate future growth, is something close to 0% or 2% out of their total spending. So the spending that they are making, that Rachel Reeves, in a best case scenario, will use to support, is the least amount that they're spending on.
They're just buying votes.
They're just buying votes and buying time. They're just buying votes and buying time. And now they want to use private pensions in order to fund the ability to buy votes and buy time. That's the last genius idea that they have. Now, if this principle is conceded, if they do get to dictate what do pensions, what do pension pools spend their money on, why should they stop at 10%? Why not 50?
Well, this is, I'm no hardcore Thatcherite, but it really is the Margaret Thatcher dictum of, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money.
100%. 100%. So if they allow this to go through, it will start at a limited amount, 5%, 10%, whatever it is. But it will not by any means stop there. Because these guys, in their minds, they don't have a braking mechanism. Evidence doesn't matter. Reality doesn't matter.
Or they think that the problem is not going to knock their door. It's going to knock the door of whoever comes after them.
Well, that's the disaster with democracy. The disaster with democracy is that you think about a 5-year time span when the question requires a 100-year time span. These kinds of decisions, what are you going to do to provide for your retirement? What are you going to do to provide for your children? These are decisions that are taking on a time frame of 30 years, 40 years, 100 years if you're wise. These people can't think beyond the next election.
Well, this was entirely the case when the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives joined a coalition back in 2010, and the discussion was being had about nuclear power and nuclear power stations, and I believe it was Nick Clegg who said, oh, well, it'll take 15 years to get it all up. It's like, well, it's 15 years later now, Nick, and we could really be doing with those nuclear power stations right about now.
Yep, exactly.
And that's 15 years, never mind 100.
They're not
Exactly.
green friendly.
Haha. Nuclear is the greenest.
Yes.
But these people are so
sorry,
ideological.
yeah.
It's hilarious that they think that. It's true that this is what they believe. It's true that this is
Well,
exactly what they think.
it would be inconvenient for them to acknowledge, the cleanliness of nuclear energy, because if you acknowledge that nuclear is by far and away the best option,
Yes.
and you just get the nuclear power stations up, all of a sudden you don't have all of this reasoning to seize on other people's assets and to strip them of their money and their
I think there is an explanation in this, that it's basic, I think is where their survival instinct kicks in, because to have nuclear power, you need competent people. They know they're incompetent. They know the people who support them are incompetent. So they say best not to go down this route.
Yep, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Yeah. It's very short-term thinking. You can see from Keir Starmer's last press conference that the knives are completely out for him, which means that now they're making their spending decisions based on whether or not there's going to be a leadership challenge, and based on the polling and what that means for 2029, not on anything like the kind of time frame that you need to be thinking about if you're investing in infrastructure. And the starkest example of this is the collapse in investment spending in Britain. There's no spending on investment from the public sector.
It's bloody startling.
I think it's a criticism of the system and of the fact that with a universal franchise, you have a fundamental problem, which is that people can vote for more money for themselves. And that automatically leads to a broken system. It's just not sane for people who are dependent on others to be making these kinds of decisions. And it's not sane to make these decisions with a 2-year time frame or a 5-year time frame when you should at least be thinking in a 50-year time frame. And these people are incapable of any long-term thinking.
No, and it's also a case of, when you go back to Starmer's recent rhetoric on all of the immigration stuff,
yes.
Starmer's saying, well, look at this hand, what this hand is doing. But in fact, if you see what the other hand is doing, you'll see something far more sinister and just as crippling.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the immigration policy is the ultimate example of short-term thinking. We think that it might boost GDP by 0.x%, but it will destroy the ability of young people to get jobs because there's alternative labor. It will increase the pension liabilities because you have people who will become pensioners and rely on the state. It will destroy social cohesion, and it will destroy the need for automation, which is what actually underpins labor productivity and therefore wages. So it's the ultimate in short-term thinking. And that's all these guys are capable of.
We've been complaining about what appears to be the intentional degradation of our educational system for years now. If you went through the state school system in the UK, as I did, you will know exactly what I mean. Just listen to the man in the street interviews from the 1960s compared to those done now, and it is crystal clear that those people then have something that we don't have now. Put simply, we're being dumbed down by the powers that be on purpose. But we don't have to accept this perpetual lowering of standards. We are still a free people, and it's time to do something about it. This is why we have created courses.lotuseaters.com, a platform on which we are now offering courses which are tailor-made to reconstruct the education that has been denied to us. The first course we have available is Dr. Nima Parvini's Excellent Trivium, a tripartite course consisting of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, which is the foundation and backbone of a classical education. This course will make you a better writer, speaker, and thinker, and it used to be that every 12-year-old in the country would take it. Personally, I will be doing this course with my own children to ensure they get the benefits of it for their whole lives, but it's never too late to do it, and I really think you should. We will also be producing many other courses in the future on subjects which are not topics of idle interest, but which instead will level you up as a person and make you more effective in the real world. I want to be clear, these are not YouTube videos. They are university-level lectures and coursework with a test at the end to which you will have to apply yourself. In these, we are not offering you an easy life. We are offering you the foundations of what you will need to be a part of the ascent of our civilization out of the hole that was dug for us. They are not easy, but they are rewarding. They are an investment in yourself that will provide you with skills that you will use for the rest of your life. Courses.lotuseaters.com. We will see you there.